Hi guys, welcome to the Heal podcast where trauma meets transformation. I'm Ruth and I'm joined by my co-host Elif today. And today we're going to be unpacking the impact of the Cwe Cwe case, where a 7-year-old was allegedly sexually assaulted at school. Now this story has touched a nerve across South Africa and beyond. We take a look at wounded masculinity and how suppressed emotion, power imbalance, and silence can perpetuate harm in our society. Our aim is to explore this not as critics, but as moms, as humans who are deeply invested in healing, accountability, and consciousness.
Hi guys, I'm Elif, and I am a spiritual coach and a psychic medium. And Ruth and I have decided to come together to have these difficult conversations where the facts might be quite scattered all over social media. We would like to bring them together into a safe space to foster a community where we are part of the problem, part of the solution, and not the problem. So I just want to give a disclaimer: everything that we say in this podcast, in this recording, to the best of our knowledge, based on our research with the information that is available, we've tried to put it together in an order that is understandable, but it is alleged. This is not, the investigation is still underway. It is not absolute fact. We will tell you, we will mention where we get the information from. If it is a personal opinion of mine, I will state that it is a personal opinion of mine. If Ruth has a personal opinion, she will state that it is her own opinion. And when we're sharing information, we will also highlight what is known to be fact, what has been confirmed, and what is alleged. We want to invite all of you to be able to sit with us and have the conversations that empower us as a community towards finding solutions, creating a safe space for our loved ones, because we can all admit that sexual assault has become somewhat of a pandemic, and we can all do with some more awareness and better ways of approaching these situations. It is evident, especially in the comment sections of our social media, that we have this knee-jerk reaction to these cases and these very, very traumatic experiences that families are having, without any real consideration to whether or not it helps or harms. And that's what we want to create space for. So we welcome you all, and we hope that this serves to support those of you who are experiencing similar experiences in your own spaces. Unfortunately, not all cases receive the kind of coverage that we would like for them to receive. But hopefully this space, this podcast, will just support in being a voice for those who are voiceless. So I'm not going to say I hope you enjoy. It's going to be a tough conversation, but I hope that it serves. Okay, so handing over to Ruth.
Thank you, Elif. Absolutely. Let's get into the timeline, which gives a bit of a perspective to the case. So we're going to be looking at the events that unfolded. This started in October 2024. On the 15th of October 2024, Cwe Cwe's parents noticed signs of trauma. Her mother noticed signs of trauma, and she was taken to a medical facility to have an exam. And then on the 16th of October, the incident was reported to the South African Police Services and the school. And the school allegedly issued a transfer letter instead of offering support to her family. Then from October to March 2025, during those months, the South African Police Services, they thoroughly investigated this case, and this sparked community frustration. There was very little coverage in the media during this time because the case remained unresolved for months. Then on the 28th of March, the Eastern Cape Department of Education, they announced the deregistration of Burview College. Now, this is where the assault apparently took place. And that was for failing to provide a safe environment to Cwe Cwe. On the 1st of April, a new South African Police Services officer was assigned to oversee the investigation. And then in April 2025, there were no specific dates on this one. The South African Police Services identified 3 suspects, including the principal. DNA testing began, and initially it was reported that the principal refused to cooperate and give his DNA. And then in mid-April, it was reported that the principal submitted his DNA. And on the 4th of April, we have the National Prosecuting Authority declined to prosecute. That is the last update we had. That was citing insufficient evidence. The South African Police Services also acknowledge investigative delays. And Elif, I just wanted to touch on that last part. That must have absolutely been a blow to the family when they declined to prosecute. And this is where the case is currently at.
Yes, yes. So it's very important to note that when a prosecutor declines to prosecute, it is because they've weighed up the strength of the case. Unfortunately, at this stage, in 2025, investigations around sexual assault is still not to the standard that it should be. And of course, you don't want to take a family and a child through an extensive court hearing if there's not sufficient evidence to prove that it is in fact so. So there's a lot of things for the prosecutor to take into account. And I have some personal experience where this is concerned, and I'll go into that a little bit more later down the line, because we definitely want to talk about this. We want to discuss the various points around why a case would potentially not be prosecuted. I do just want to mention that I want to add to some of the timeline that you've given and some of the facts that you've given. You ended on the prosecutor not wanting to declining prosecution due to lack of evidence. This does not necessarily mean that they are no longer investigating. That simply means that they need to do more thorough or further investigation. This runs the risk that after so many months, all evidence could potentially be destroyed. So now you're relying on witnesses and people who are willing to corroborate, or other victims, other people who might have had similar experience to begin to build a case. I do want to also share that I came across information around a inquiry done by the chief of police, Minister of Police, with the chief of police. Okay. The chief of police did admit that the investigation could have been conducted more professionally. They could have done a better job. So the chief of police is admitting to some extent that they didn't really investigate to standards that one would consider professional. It's not saying that directly, but there is an acknowledgement that the investigation could have been better. And that is what contributes to the case not being ready for prosecution or not being prosecuted, being thrown out of prosecution. It's been handed over to, I've written it down because I don't want to say the wrong name, to the National Let me see if I can find it. To the National Commissioners. Okay, so the National Commissioner deployed the head of family violence and child protection to conduct an investigation. I think a lot of people have gotten stuck on the fact that there's no foreign DNA found on the child, and so what does that mean? It doesn't really mean that it didn't happen. And I've noticed a lot of people in the comment section assuming that because of that statement that there was no foreign DNA found, that automatically that means that it didn't happen. But we'll go into that a little bit more. I just wanted to confirm that the investigation is not closed. There was simply not enough proof or evidence to prosecute at this stage. So
Yes.
I can imagine that it's disheartening for the family, because if to date they haven't gathered the evidence that is necessary, that is required, and just think about this, Ruth, going to have a medical exam, discovering what they discovered. One would think that's enough proof, right? But they've got to tie a suspect to this, and there's many, many ways in which they can do that. So if you will allow me, I will begin to go through the events. I'm going to start with the mother's story. I've gone through all the videos that she posted, Emily, to tell her story, in the hope that she would get support, because I think she came to realize that she's not going, certain procedures were not being followed as expected by the police department and the Department of Education and the school. And I think you hope that the community that you entrust with your child will come together when you're experiencing a trauma. But when you have an experience like this, there's a very, very harsh reality that often hits. So let's begin. So this is my case study based on Cwe, that's Cwe Cwe's mom. That's her mother. Okay, so Cwe did personal recordings, which was shared all over TikTok. And this fortunately did result in a lot of people, those who had access to this video. So at the time, as you've mentioned, her little girl was 7 years old. Okay? And the incident happened when she was 7. You also mentioned that a couple of months before anything was done. All right. But the incident, they discovered that something was not right with the girl who was 7 years old. She was doing grade 1 at Berkeley College, located in Gauteng town. That's in the Eastern. And on the 14th of October, as you have stated, she arrived home later than usual because the driver, who the mother calls Malume, our schools in South Africa do not provide transport. Most of them don't provide transport. Parents drop off and pick up their kids. In the communities where parents are not at home during the day to be able to do that, or cannot afford vehicles, if the school is in the area, most kids will go to school and back home by themselves. Because of the gap between the level of education that we have in our private schools, and because of some of the security factors at our public schools in communities where there is a lot of violence, a lot of parents make the sacrifice to pay for their kids to go to private colleges, schools, because they're hoping that a better education also provides more opportunities, but also provides safety. And as a result, kids need to get to school and back. So on this particular day, Malume's boss told him to go and do something or other in another area. And so he asked a colleague to pick the kids. But the colleague was late. They phoned him, the transport. I'm not sure who it is because that has not been confirmed. That's not information that's been given. But someone at the school called the transport to find out where they were. And then there was this Malume being in another area, having to locate the person that he asked to fill in for him and find out what's going on, and then getting back to the school to say that the driver was late. They did not call the parents. Right? So you would think that the proper procedure is, I've got transport to get my child to and from school. That is not school transport. They do not work for you. They could have let me know that they are not going to be able to drive on that day, and I could have made alternate arrangements. So the I would imagine that the proper procedure would be to call them up. Now, there is nothing in writing that that is what's going to happen, but even Tandekile said usually they would phone her and she would then make another arrangement or communicate with Malume what is happening. Nobody called her on this day. So the child arrived home. Cwe Cwe arrived home much later than usual on the 14th of October. On the 14th of October, Cwe Cwe's father stayed home to take their lastborn to consult with the GP. Their lastborn, their baby, was sick. So the father decided to stay home to take the lastborn to school. And the mother left work early also to rush to get to the GP to see what was going on. It's very important to know that she stated that on the 15th, okay, so she rushed home to the GP because she also wanted to be there to support her child, okay, to see what's going on. Then the parents arrived back home on the 15th at 11:30. So that's quite early in the day. The parents were at home at 11:30. Right? After which the father left to ask neighbors to help him slaughter a pig for an upcoming party. It's very important to note the party was planned for the weekend. It was an upcoming party. It wasn't a party on that day. The father went to ask neighbor to help to slaughter, okay? And then on the 15th of the very same day, on the 15th, which is the next day, apologies, Cwe Cwe arrived home around, no, it is the same day. So the 14th is when she came home late. She went to sleep. Okay, I'm going into more detail about what mom said about that, but she arrived home late. That's the only thing they said. On the 15th, they had the GP appointment for the little one. They arrived home at 11:30, after which the father left the house to go and ask the neighbor to help slaughter a pig for the upcoming party. On the very same day, which is the 15th, Cwe Cwe arrived home around 3:30 p.m. So mom was home before her, dad was home before her, dad had gone to ask the neighbor to help slaughter. And her mother was concerned about the fact that her clothes seemed amiss. And this was on the 15th. All right. So she was wearing a jersey, Tandekile said, and it was quite hot. So she wasn't sure what was going on. Is she not feeling well? And then she noticed that the gray trousers her little girl was wearing, the zip was unzipped. Now, this could mean a number of things. Tandekile was telling the story, and the thing that stood out to her, the best of her knowledge, she was not making any accusations in the video. She was telling the story. So she asked Cwe Cwe, what's going on with your clothes? Why are you wearing a jersey? The little girl didn't answer her. She said, and what's going on with your pants? Still didn't say anything. Went off to her room, okay? So Cwe didn't explain or answer why she was wearing the jersey or what was happening with her pants. Cwe calls it a jersey, but later she said then she just unzipped her jacket. So obviously she meant the jacket and called it a jersey. She just unzipped it and this is when the mother noticed that the pants. So she had the jersey over. When she asked her about the jersey, she unzipped the jacket, and then she noticed that her grey pants is unzipped. When her mother asked questions about the pants, she didn't answer. At approximately 6 p.m., Cwe complained about her stomach because she didn't answer about her clothing. She just went to her room. Okay? And bear in mind, they had a sick baby. So obviously, mom was busy with the child. They were preparing for a party. Cwe went to her room, probably to let, one would think as a mother, she's probably lying down or something. 6 p.m., she started to complain about her stomach. She went to the toilet, okay, and told her mother that she's still not okay when she came out of the toilet. She went to the toilet for a second time, and her mother gave her a Panado and an antidiuretic. So she must have thought she's got an upset stomach and sent her to bed, right? There's so many tummy bugs going around. On the 16th of October, which is now day 3, okay? The mother woke. Tandekile woke at 4 a.m. in the morning to assist her helper with cooking. The helper would usually cook. Tandekile decides she's going to help her out. She's going to take one of her chores off of her shoulders because the baby is not well. So she can focus her attention on the last one now that is not well. Really early in the morning, this was around 4 a.m. And then her husband called her to see Cwe Cwe because she was going to the toilet again. Something was right. Okay, so this is 4 in the morning. When Tandekile went to inquire, Cwe Cwe told her mother that she could not sleep during the night because she had been to the toilet 3 times. This is what she told her mother. And my bums are very sore. So at this stage, the mother decided, let me check what is going on here. Why would her bottom be sore? And why would she be running to the toilet 3 times? Let me just have a look. I assume she was still thinking maybe it's diarrhea or something. So she used the torch of her phone. She stated that it was load shedding, and therefore she used her torch. Okay. And she told Cwe Cwe to bend over on her bed. She's going to have a look and see what's happening. What this mother discovered was horrific because she described seeing Cwe Cwe's anus stretched to the size of the inside of the toilet roll. She took a toilet roll in the video and showed us that she's like that. I could see the fecal matter. I just started crying. For a mother to have to tell that story to the public because she's so desperate. This is when he decides to take her to the GP. Obviously, what do you do? And it was on the 16th, on the morning of the 16th, that the GP determined that a rape had occurred. So that was the first time that she even realized, because Tandekile says it didn't even cross her mind. Is there anything you would like to add at this point, Ruth, before I continue?
Yeah, that must have been absolutely horrific. Just witnessing that as a mom, I can just imagine. So many thoughts must have been going through her mind about what has happened to her child. And yes, on the 16th, I also have it on my timeline.
Yes.
No, I'm happy for you to continue with Tandikili, but the impact on the mother, I just want to touch on that because as a mother, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Hila?
I think she must have been gaslighting herself. Maybe it's some sort of medical thing. Maybe it's, you know, and there are so many people accusing the mother of hiding something. I am a survivor of sexual assault. I know people who are. That is not, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I'd rather be wrong about this than to further victimize a mother and be wrong about that. In my opinion, if you want to hide something, you hide something. You don't run to the GP in distress asking for answers if you already know what happened, you know. So, and I
We can also
yeah,
you could go into a state of shock.
yeah,
There's so many things that can happen in that moment. As a parent discovering that your child has experienced a violation in some sort, also being a survivor of sexual assault, especially in a place where you should be safe, can shatter so many things in a moment. The sense of trust, safety, and even self in that moment. So we can suggest that I was devastated, but also we are going to be looking in the ways in which she was unsupported during this time. From my point of view, by the institution, the school, and by society at large. You touched on it briefly when you spoke about there was so much misinformation, even around the party. People were asking questions like, what happened at the party? The sexual assault happened at the party. It didn't happen at the school because the facts were obscured. But getting back to the emotional state of the mother, it must have just been unimaginable for her.
Ruth, I think you can agree with me that the world that we live in, you will be hard pressed to sit in a room with a group of women. I would have liked to say men, but I know men experience this horror as well. There's less to speak about it. There's a lot of shame. So I'll use the example of women. You'll be hard pressed to sit in a room with a group of women and ask, how many of you have experienced this and not had most of them put their hands up? We learned very early on that we are not safe. And the experiences that we have with our families and the way that the community deals with these things and families and then the police and the system, we try and put all our effort into protecting our kids. So when this happens, and I confirm this, you feel, how did I drop the ball? How did this happen? How did I let this happen?
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to add to that, Elif, from personal experience, our voices in the past have been met with shame. So
Yeah.
silence was rather chosen. When we raise these issues that we were assaulted in the past as women who have experienced sexual assault, it was met with shame or anger. So we felt that silence was rather the way out. And I just want to speak with our mother again, Cwe Cwe's mother. Any mother feels in that position, you carry your child's pain. And I absolutely love that you went into the timeline, and thank you so much for clarifying that. I think that is so, so important.
Yes. If you and I could do it, I was doing my research independently. You were doing your research independently. Listening is a skill, guy. And if you just apply yourself a little bit, if you really care, just do the research. Don't just listen to the first person telling you a story on social media and then run with it, because it can really be more harmful than anything else. So it was on the 16th that the GP determined that a rape had occurred. Tande Kile said in her recording, up to that point, she must have been in denial. She said, it still did not occur to me until the GP said, all right?
When
And this, when the parents took the child, the next thing they thought of doing was to go to a psychologist. But the psychologist that they went to was not there on the 16th. Next, they went to the police station. Okay. And then the mother went to the school to inform them about Cwe Cwe's condition, because by that stage on the 16th, she could not. Okay. Now, I just want to note that many people are going to assume, well, she seemed fine on the 14th. On the 15th, she was just complaining about being constipated. No, she wasn't. She said her stomach, it's sore. That's all she did. She didn't really speak. On the 16th, she had gone for an examination. I want us to consider for a moment the impact of trauma on the body. How many of us have experienced high stress, traumatic experiences, and we are fully functional? And the moment that things calm down and something is acknowledged, suddenly our body collapses. The body can. It also makes me think of pregnancies that are hidden, that no one sees until someone finds out, and then suddenly the pregnancy is there. This
if I can just Sorry, if I can just interject there. I just want to remind our audience or talk to the fact that this is a 7-year-old child. So articulating the details of that traumatic event, especially sexual violence, is extraordinarily difficult. At that age, the child is still developing language, emotional maturity. So for her to say that her stomach was sore is absolutely normal. I don't think she was able to. That's just my perspective. Articulate to her mother what was happening within her body, let alone someone violating. And then we also have a report of her being given something where she does not remember all the details. That was also reported on.
Ruth, I work with people who process their trauma. I sit with adults who find it difficult to experience. Okay, so at the stage on the 16th, when they didn't find the psychologist to be at the offices, went to the police station, and then decided to go to the school to inform them about her condition. Why would they do that? She didn't go to the school to accuse anyone. She did what any parent would do, to inform the child is not well, this has happened to her, so that they can understand why she's not at school, and also have compassion for what is to come. So, and Mum says, Tandekile says, at this, because she informed the school of what happened, because at this stage, she noticed that Cwe Cwe was finding it difficult to walk. How do you send her to school? The police escorted them to Tuzela Hospital, right? And at Tuzela Hospital, Cwe Cwe was questioned by a social worker. So obviously, this is the procedure. I know this personally. You go to the police, you tell them what has happened, you write out the report. The next step is you've got to go to the hospital for it to be confirmed. And then immediately the child is interviewed by a psychologist. The child is not interrogated, the child is interviewed. Okay. Later, arrangements should be made for the child to start being interviewed by a forensic psychologist on a regular basis. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit. That was not arranged for this family. Okay. But we're still on the 16th. Okay. So it's being interviewed at Tuzela Hospital by the social worker. And at this stage, it is clear, all right, that they are focused, the parents are focused on the 15th, not the 14th. Okay. He said that we were still not thinking anything about the 14th. We were thinking about the 15th when her clothes seemed funny. When she came home, she was hardly speaking. She was complaining about her stomach. So the mom, Tandekile, was saying, I'm still focusing on the 15th. All right. The child was again attended to by a doctor at Tutuzela Hospital, obviously. So that, because this, remember, they went to their personal GP initially. So then they went to the police, and the police their doctor has to confirm. The state's doctor has to confirm. So again, she had gone through an examination. This little 7-year-old girl. Samples were collected. Okay. And the mother administered, once they arrived back home, around 8 p.m., Cwe Cwe's mother administered to the child. Okay, I just want to correct that. Just a little bit. When they arrived home, mom decided to administer PrEP to Cwe Cwe. She doesn't give a time. Cwe Cwe went to go and lie down. She woke up at 8 p.m. All right? And then at 12:25 a.m., because she woke up at 8 and she was again complaining of pain, they decided to rush her to Port Shepstone Hospital at 12:25 a.m. on the 17th. So this is the night of the 16th, early hours of the morning. They were driving through from where they live to Port Shepstone Hospital, because the parents were concerned about her psychological state. And Tandekile says, she asked her, are you okay? She brought she calls it a jug of water. I think it must have been a little bucket. Okay. Also very important to note, in South Africa, we have 11 official languages. Our native speaking people are forced to speak English for the comfort of everybody else. Most of us don't speak the native languages. Now think about it. If you're not speaking in your first language, and most native speaking South Africans do a really good job of speaking English, but you can call a jacket a jersey. You can say he to she. So we've got to listen very intently and be willing to ask questions. You've got to listen carefully, otherwise you will completely misconstrue what somebody is saying. So Tandekile says when she got the bucket, the jug, she calls it a jug of water, perhaps to wipe her face. Maybe she's got what do you do as a mother when your child got well? Cwe looked at the water and says, I wish I could go in this water so that I can feel better. At this point, Tandekile realized that psychologically her child is in decline. This is why at 12:25 a.m. they decided to rush to Port Shepstone Hospital. And that was early hours of the morning on the 17th of October. After being admitted, she also states that private hospitals don't admit or deal with rape cases, so they must have gone to a private hospital. Obviously, just thinking of anything, what must we do? What must we do? She pleaded with them, and they did later admit to at 8 a.m. in the morning on the 7th. And then Thandekile went to freshen up. Okay, obviously, you've been up all night trying to get admitted into the hospital. Now your child's admitted. She wanted to go to the toilet to freshen up, so she asked Cwe Cwe's father to return to just be with Cwe Cwe while she goes to the toilet to freshen up. And when she came back from the toilet, she walked in on him speaking to Cwe Cwe, asking her questions, obviously wanting to know what happened. So we asked, why was she late on Monday? You know, like what happened? Why was she late on Monday? And this is when Cwe Cwe told them the story about Monday, which is what she shared in the recording. Okay? And what she shared was Cwe Cwe said to her, Malume wasn't there, the transport wasn't there, and they were waiting. They were standing waiting, and then the caretaker came to her, who she also calls Malume. I don't know if that's his name or if that's a gesture of respect. I would love it if someone in the comments can correct that or let us know if they know any better. But she said that the caretaker called it and said she was going to sweep the class.
I think it means people.
Oh,
It's
yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you, Ruth, for that. So, because I thought so. Yeah, I thought so. So she sweeps the classroom and she says to her mom, she fell asleep. She smelled something funny and she fell asleep. And the next thing, Malume, the caretaker, woke her up from her sleep and said, your driver's here. Because she didn't remember anything. So there is no evidence of her being drugged. The assumption is, was something burnt? Had something happened? Was she given something? Because, to my knowledge, and many other people in South Africa, many houses are broken into where they burn something. They burn a CD or they burn something, the paras or the thieves. They burn something so that the family sleeps and doesn't wake up whilst they're stealing the stuff in the house. Many people have reported something being smelling like, having a funny smell okay. So I think that's what many people were assuming. The mere fact that she went into the classroom perfectly fine, was going to sweep, and then woke up on the floor not knowing what had happened. There are some unanswered questions there. And at this point, this is when the parents phoned the police again to inform them about what Cwe Cwe told them about on the morning. Okay? Then immediately, Thandekile went to the bathroom to phone the driver to ask him what happened. On the 30th of October, Thandekile received a call from the principal inviting her to come to the school to meet at 10 a.m. He handed her 2 documents. The one was a letter of declaration declaring that they will support her in any way possible. And the second one was a contradictory. And I say this because the second document was an order or a warning to refrain from defaming the school's name, threatening legal action. So in essence, wanting to silence her. We'll support you in any way possible, but
If you keep
don't say anything that's going to make the school look bad.
we'll support you.
In that moment, he incriminated himself. No one had accused him of anything. his main concern, it became very clear to Tandekile that his concern is for the school, for the school's reputation, and that he does not want her to be vocal or to spread any awareness around what has happened to her child. What are your thoughts about this?
I think I just want to touch on the principal's behavior for a little moment here. Because when we talk about accountability in this case, up till this moment and this point in the case, Tandekile has been supporting her child. There's been support from the hospital, from the police. She is a police officer herself. So, but we can't ignore the role of the principal. His name is Jaco Pieterse. And from my perspective, you know, you were just saying now, we will support you if you keep quiet. That is what I heard from that. You know, those two statements that you made now, he gave them the declaration, but in the same sentence, contradicting himself and just ruling that out because that means nothing. We'll support you on the condition that you keep silent. And the principal's duty for me, even growing up, you know, our principals, they were protectors. They would protect people in the school. If something went down, they would absolutely immediately deal with it, no matter what happened. A principal's duty isn't just to oversee operations or protect the reputation of the school, it's to lead with integrity. And I feel here that that didn't necessarily happen. They're supposed to act as a guardian for every child under their care and to be an emotional anchor, especially in a case like this, which you could almost say was a crisis. I know that reports from Sowetan and the Times Live, you know, they describe the principal as someone being very cold, you know, following the incident. He met with them initially, which is where you're at the moment, but he showed indifference right from the get-go. And I totally agree with you. He incriminated himself there. You know, because this behavior, it shows that it's dismissive. Yeah, he didn't really give the emotional support that was needed. And you could almost say that it was dehumanizing. What are your thoughts on that, Ela?
Look, Ruth, my question is, the question that rings in my mind is, why was that his knee-jerk reaction? You see, we are not obligated to take a particular position or to feel a particular way, or he is definitely not on trial for not caring or wanting to handle things in a particular way. However, why was his knee-jerk reaction to silence her? When there was no video, she did not record. I do not find any statement, public statement, and if anybody has evidence of her going public between the 17th or the 15th and the 30th when he called her in, she went online to talk about the school and what happened at the school and what went on. You know, I was trying to see what sort of timeline there was around videos being recorded. But by the time she recorded her first video, she was talking about this meeting in past tense. I paid attention to that. If I am not correct, please provide us with evidence that she immediately on the 16th, on the 17th, started to point fingers at the school. She was asking questions, which is the right thing to do. Okay, she asked the driver and she told the police about what happened, which is the correct procedure. Why was his knee-jerk reaction to tell her not to defame the school?
I think that it's really important. She was invited by the principal, and we can see that his knee-jerk reactions, like you said, that is not leadership. It's avoidance. You know, accountability is not just about legal blame. It's about moral responsibility. Even if he was not the perpetrator, he's still the principal of the school where a serious alleged crime was committed. And his response has been marked to date by cold detachment. There's been no apology from his side publicly that we know of. And I've gone through all of this to date. A true leader, a true healthy masculine figure will step in, will speak out, and will stand with the most vulnerable. He doesn't wait for public pressure. He should have immediately, when he was notified about it, he should have gone, I know of principals who will go to people's houses. He leads from the front. He should have led from the front, even when it's uncomfortable. And in this case, I don't see, that there was true leadership. What are your thoughts on that?
As I said before, even if we want to argue that how he feels doesn't matter, his opinion, how he feels, who he decides is important, what he thinks matters, he is irrelevant. He did not fulfill his duty as a principal. His
Absolutely.
duty as a principal, it's not necessarily go to the family, sympathize with them. His duty as the principal, he did not even let the Department of Education know. He gave a letter stating, we will support you. He did not say, what do we need to do? These are the steps that I followed so far. This is what I've done. Is there anything else that we as a school can do? What has not been done? That entire meeting, you pointed out, Ruth, it's basically saying, yes, two separate letters, but in essence, collectively they're saying, we will support you if you keep quiet. Meaning that support is also very vague. What is that support? What is that support?
Exactly.
He did not apologize,
And
as you said, but AfriForum got him an apology from someone in the police, and I forgot this man's name now, who had to write an apology letter for saying he is a suspect when he wasn't actually a suspect yet. He was a person of interest. So that man misspoke. But they wanted to get a letter of apology because of everything he went through. So there's no compassion for this family at all. That is certainly not someone we want as a principal, protecting and leading us.
I want to touch on that. The representative from AfriForum, his name is Cwe Cwe. And just on that point there, Elif, the seeking support from AfriForum, if I can just speak to that for a moment. From my point of view, if you are a person of integrity, why would you need to turn to a politically loaded organization to defend yourself? Why not let your professional record and conduct speak for itself? Seeking support, I don't think that it's inherently wrong, but in this context, for me, it raises a lot of questions, and I'd like our viewers maybe just to speak to that as well. What do you think about this? Was this move about clarity and justice when he went to AfriForum, or is it about controlling the narrative and avoiding deeper accountability? So these actions matter deeply.
Look that way, but let's just for a moment, let's not speculate. Just for context, you only have to go and look at what AfriForum is about. You only have to look at what AfriForum is about. There is a narrative of victimhood amongst the white Afrikaner group that is obviously a very privileged group of people in our country. They find it very hard to admit and acknowledge that. There's a lot of privilege there. I'm not saying all Afrikaners are. I think it depends on what an individual's definition of privilege is. Privilege simply means I have an advantage. And in South Africa is the only country where the group that is privileged is in total denial and finds it really difficult to admit that. It is obvious. AfriForum supports white Afrikaners only. It is not, their support is not for South Africans across the board. And a lot of people feel that it's always about race. Race is always being brought in. I'm not interested in making this a conversation about race, but we cannot have this conversation where AfriForum has taken the position to defend this man and protect him. They clearly made it about his race, that he needs to be protected because he's going to be persecuted by South Africans and by our government because he's white. It is an untruth. So there is an automatic bias there. I'm not saying that he's not entitled to getting legal help. The fact that he got legal help is irrelevant to me. That is every human being's right. The fact that he obstructed the investigation is a separate topic for me. And those two can't help but bleed into one another. Why did he obstruct the investigation? Why was his intention, why was his first reaction not to do whatever it takes to help this investigation? Why was his instinct to protect himself? Naturally, that is a red flag for so many reasons. That doesn't make him guilty, but the fact that he didn't want to give his DNA meant that he is protecting something. Now, perhaps he's not. Perhaps he wasn't involved with what happened with Cwe Cwe. Time will tell, or maybe not. People get away with this kind of thing all the time. But perhaps his DNA will implicate him in other investigation, in other cases. Or he just felt so entitled as a principal and a white Afrikaans man. How dare anyone look at him and question him for this? When there are so many people that are far beneath him that should be looked at. This is, yes, a speculation, but it's a possibility. What do you draw from that? Why would I feel that I'm entitled to being protected as the principal from any defamation, from any questioning? I'm so above that. Why? We're all equal, isn't it? And if we all know that the people who are in a victim's immediate circle are the first to be looked at. The child is at school every single day.
And I just want to add to that, AfriForum has been known to, they are an organization which has been known to, there's a lot of controversy around them. And when they became involved, there was a huge uproar in the community. But just to get back to your point there, Ila, if you're a person of integrity, and especially if you're innocent, why wouldn't you want to cooperate fully? Would be my question. Why wouldn't you offer? Yeah.
I go so far as to say, Ruth, that he is responsible for so much time going by and this case not being investigated properly. Because had they ruled him out, they could have moved on to the next part of the investigation. So
Exactly.
it's
So
not
much time
under the bus. It's not about deciding that he's guilty before he's been proven guilty. It's about the fact that we need to become a part of the solution here. And we need to be the adults in the situation. Something terrible has happened to a child in our community. If we can help, we need to rally around and help. And anybody that is not doing that is the problem. You are the problem. You might not be the perpetrator, but you basically help this perpetrator get away with this, possibly.
And it's about choices. So you get to choose to be part of the solution or part of the problem. And when he had that initial meeting, just going back to that point, your last point of reference, he made a clear choice in providing one document, but then switching over. And true leadership means stepping forward without hesitation to assist, whether it's investigators, to comfort the community, the family, to reinforce the message, the primary message that every child's safety matters above all else. What are your thoughts on that?
It's taking responsibility. True leadership is about taking responsibility. And it was very clear in his actions that he was not wanting to do that at all. The reasons why he did that, we can go into that until we blew in the face. What I do want to, a point I want to touch on, Ruth, is the fact that many people will consider the fear that exists around misinformation. When South Africa stepped into freedom, and I put it into quotation marks because we're still not free, all right? But post-apartheid, when we gave space to a new president, our first Black president, there are witnesses who have spoken about the fear-mongering, the narrative that went around amongst white communities, that they're going to be murdered, how ruthless and barbaric Black people are, and that the South Africa is going to become a very dangerous place for them. The indoctrination. It is interesting to me because if you go to the different parts of South Africa, and I'm not talking about just a select part, if you allow yourself to spend time in all of South Africa, in all communities, you will soon realize that that is not a narrative. In order to still have that narrative stuck in your brain as your truth about this country, you must be privileged. You must be in your little corner in the world. But there is clearly a lot of fear around this and this narrative of victimhood, that because you are white, you're going to be persecuted, or you're going to be blamed for this, or you're going to be seen as the bad guy. You're not going to get any protection from the government. But white people still have better representation. I could argue that. And this is a general statement. It's not every person, but there is still better representation in our system for people who have money and who have access to lawyers, right? As in this case.
Absolutely. I think there was
yeah.
There was a TikToker that said if the roles were reversed, this is not a case about race, just saying that again, but let us know your thoughts in the comments, guys. There was a famous TikToker who said, and I actually saved the clip, she said, if the roles were reversed in this case, and the little girl was not Cwe Cwe, it was another color, right? For example, a white girl. And the perpetrator, for example, or the principal was black, what would the situation have looked like? And one cannot, that is a really valid point. In this case, like I said, it's not about race. Yeah, sorry, Ira, you go.
We do see it all the time. And I would like to encourage that only once we start to actually be, once we start to be brave enough to do the right thing, will we have the experience where we realize that a lot of our ignorance and a lot of our fears and a lot of our myths are debunked. You know, um, because there's because of segregation and separation, we live in different worlds, and we have these preconceived notions and ideas about what uh and the sense of separation is always there. And so there is this sort of umbrella under which we can say, well, we did this because we're afraid of that. And some might argue that the reason why the principal went to Forum for protection was because he felt he was going to be treated unfairly. So we could say that, but when I look at what happened here, nobody accused him of anything. He was the one that called the meeting. He was the one that showed his hand with these two documents. That was the action he chose. There was a million things he could have done. That was the first action he chose, and then refusing to give his DNA was the second. That was his choice. Nobody accused him. Nobody incriminated him. He did it to himself. Because if you are not helping a situation, if somebody's bleeding on the side of the road, and you can offer a plaster, but you choose to get into your car with your plaster and drive away, what does that say about you? It's your actions speak for themselves. Right. So that's what happened, is that meeting, and things got so uncomfortable and so heated that he even took out his phone and said to her, "I'm recording you." And she said, "Yeah, that's fine." But he didn't record the part where he gave her the letters. He was recording afterwards now. So he was constantly in this defense. Why? Why was he so defensive? Okay. Right. And then he asked if he could pray for her. So he gives her these two letters. There is this very uncomfortable exchange where it's made very clear to her his position. And I can only imagine in this moment what she must have felt like as a mom. She must have felt totally alone. And once again, why did I bring my child to this school? Is this where I brought my child? Where the head of this institution that I pay money to, that I work for, this is what he thinks of us. This is what he thinks of us. Okay, and then ask if he can pray for her. What is his prayer going to do? People. When you say we're praying for you, we understand what you mean. You're saying there's nothing I can do. I feel so helpless that I'm just going to pray and hope something works out for you. This is a man in a position of power. He's the principal of the school, and he's saying, I'll pray for you. To me, in my opinion, what he was saying in that moment is, and this is my opinion, what the undercurrent of what he was saying is, I'm not going to help you with anything. You will not have our support. So I'm praying for you to subdue you. I'm praying for you to accept what it is. I think that's such a slap in the face. There's so many things I can do to help and support, but what I'm going to give you is a prayer and a what do you call it? What do they normally say? I'll give you a prayer and I don't know, there's a saying. Anyway, so that was that meeting. All right. On the 15th of November, Cwe Cwe, mom of Cwe Cwe, received an email to inform the school So she received an email from the school that she needs to inform the school as to why Cwe Cwe is not attending. This is on the 15th of November, which is a month, sort of approximately a month after. All right. Tandekile also says Cwe Cwe is really bright. She was actually meant to receive awards. She had just gone through an extremely traumatic thing. There are some concerns around what happened at the school because they heard the story from the child, how the principal's behavior is really, really dodgy. So she's keeping her at home, and the principal informs her that they need some sort of written, they need something in writing as to why Cwe Cwe is not attending school. So immediately Tandekile contacts the psychologist that they were taking her to, which is their own psychologist because the police had not arranged any therapy for them at that point, to provide something. And so the psychologist did provide something in writing. So this was just their psychologist. It's not a forensic psychologist that usually is arranged by the police. And the principal responds on the very same day, on the 15th of November, to inform the parent that the child will not be promoted because the letter from the psychologist does not meet the standard. Now, to my knowledge, I had a son starting school in the middle of the year because the school that he was at, which was an online school, scammed us. Okay, the principal, also the principal, right? He scammed us. So we didn't have a report because it wasn't even valid. It was bogus what they did. The school has a system whereby they do an average. Why would you not promote her?
Exactly.
Right? Because the psychologist's letter, how can a psychologist's letter not meet the standard? What is that? He did not, when he emailed the mother in the morning, say, we need something in writing, and these are the notes or the points that need to be in there for it to meet the standards. He didn't say that. So once again, showing a clear lack of support. I want to make this as difficult for you as possible. Tandekile discovered that the Department of Education was only informed about the incident through a friend of hers on the 18th of November. So a whole month had gone by and the school had not informed the Department of Education of what had happened to the child. So what is that not protocol?
Absolutely.
On the
And that was
second,
not followed.
sorry, go
That
ahead,
was
Ruth.
that was not followed up to my knowledge. I did some research on that. But I just want to speak to Tandekile's decision to keep her child at home. As a mother, that to me speaks, and this is my personal opinion, it speaks to the complex mix of distrust. She must have been so confused because she was looking for some sort of stability in all of the chaos. What you just spoke to about, him praying for her. There were so many delays in this, and I don't blame her for wanting to keep a child at home. Absolutely.
That can I pray for you is so obviously condescending.
That is just a complete dismissal of everything that's happened. I'm going to pray for you. Just go away. That's the bottom line. From my point of view, it's dehumanizing.
And this is my personal piece. This has got nothing to do with the case. This is my personal piece, my personal opinion. For me, this cuts so deep because of our history. The native people of South Africa was colonized with religion. with Christianity. We're going to take everything you have and we're going to give you Christianity, and then we're going to control you with it. And we're going to make all of our behavior okay with that.
We'll pray for you at the end.
We cannot move forward until we recognize how deep the systematic oppression and imbalance, inequality runs. There's a history here. We'd like to move forward from it. But you cannot rebuild until you recognize the cracks in the foundation. So I'm not saying that was intentional, but do you see how it plays out here? You do not matter. My position, my business, my school, my reputation, and whatever it is that I'm wanting to protect is of more importance than you and this devastation that your child has just endured, which is going to affect her for the rest of her life and the whole family. Irrelevant to me. But here's a prayer. Here's a prayer. I'm going to accept this. I'm not going to help it. I'm going to make it difficult for you. But here's a prayer. So that's my 2 cents when it comes to that.
I think we can all relate to this, and it does hit a nerve, because you can just imagine being in a state of wanting to find stability, wanting to find answers, wanting to know what happened, looking for support in your community, and you met with this reaction from the very person that was supposed to provide leadership, support, and empathy at the very, very least. Let us know what you think in the comments, guys. Would love to know your opinion.
Of course. So, on the 2nd of December, a meeting was scheduled with the Department of Education. Okay. After a friend of Tandekile informed them of what had happened of the incident on the 18th of November. The principal was present and policies were requested by Tandekile. She asked the principal, what are the policies of the school around transport, around the vetting process of employees, around doing chores, children doing chores at the school. It's a private school.
Yeah. All right. To ask the questions.
Permission that my child must clean, do your caretaker's work. So, nonetheless, she still hasn't received. She still has not received the policies around how you handle these kinds of things. What is your school's policy around this type of thing? She didn't receive anything from the principal. And I suppose the department hadn't sat on the principal to provide anything either. As I said to you early on, I was scammed by a school, and I know that we would expect that the Department of Education would be have a finger on all of these things, but it is only right for a mother to ask, well, what's the process here? Because who do I hold responsible? My child doesn't remember what happened. Are there cameras? Those are the right questions to ask. Who was there as a witness? Was she just left alone in the class? How does a caretaker decide, you go and sweep the class, I'm going to leave you in there? Who else could have had access? So these are the right kinds of questions, and any responsible mother would ask them. And the principal should have provided it. And the Department of Education, I would expect, I don't know if they did or did not, would then have been on top of him. What is the procedure. Um, so this is the story according to Mom, and you've confirmed it as well with your timeline. Now I'd like for us to just go into just a couple of points to note before we move on to discussing some of the videos, some of the content that's been going around, some of the misinformation. Okay, so points to note. Why was the mother not informed when the transport was leaving? What is the procedure at the school? What do you, to your knowledge, Ruth, what to your knowledge is the procedure at school when school is dismissed? And this is a primary school, eh? And the transport is not free. To my knowledge, walk the kids out, see that the transport is there, or the parents are there to collect them, and then they go back to their classes. That, to my knowledge, is what happens. And if a parent is not there, they take the child back with them. Because why would you send a primary school child into the street? To the office to call Mom. That's, to my knowledge, what happens.
Absolutely. I think the breakdown in communication here, normally what happens is that the school would immediately notify the parents, you know, in any school setting, I would say, especially when transporting children. Communication with parents, that is a non-negotiable. So that should have happened, absolutely. And according to basic safety protocols, any delay in school transport, particularly one involving a 7-year-old child, should trigger immediate notification to the parent or the guardian. I know of schools, even when there's a delay with anything at school or anything that happens, it's so easy in with social media today to send a text or an email. I know of schools that have WhatsApp groups. So again, the failure to have communicated that was definitely a breakdown in communication. So from my perspective, this is it's not just an oversight, but it's a neglect of duty, I would say, because parents entrust their children to a school. If my daughter's going to be running late with the bus that she takes, I'm expecting at least a text message from the school saying, I'm sorry, there's been a delay today. The child might be 15 minutes late or so. But definitely, there's a kind of negligence here, I think, on that part. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I would like to know, and I'm sure we'll find out once this, and I am still having faith that this is going to go to court, that the right evidence is going to be found, that the right, that investigations are going to come up with something that allows this to go to court for it to be prosecuted. I would like to know who told the caretaker to tell her to go and sweep the room. What happened there? Because, and why only her? I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I would just like to know what happened there. What was the thing? Because I do believe that, yes, and also that the teacher should have taken the child. Who took the child to the transport? That they were just standing there waiting for the caretaker to then see them waiting and say, go sweep the class. Because the caretaker could have thought, well, instead of them standing out here, let them go and do something in the school. They're safer in the school than standing out here. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just saying, I'm curious to know exactly what happened at school that day. Who took the kids to the transport, left them there, even though there was no transport? What was the caretaker's thinking around letting her, and then where did he go? And who else was at the school? Because I just want to say that AfriForum has made a statement to say that Peterser, what's his name? Jacob Peterser, the principal, was not at school on that day. He was 2 kilometers away at the head office, at the base or something. That has not been confirmed. AfriForum made that statement, but that has not been verified. And it's very important to note that it has not been verified. 2 kilometers is also not very far to drive. Okay? But for argument's sake, let's say there was a witness and somebody did verify that, and they are truthful, and he wasn't at the school. Why was protocol not followed, and what are the protocols? He did not give any information around that. So that's very important. AfriForum's statement that he was not at the school on that day, and this happened at a party, not true. AfriForum has proven on many occasions that their truth is not the full truth, right? They make statements that are not founded. And there's a lot of evidence of that we've seen in the recent times. I mean, the interview with Jordan Peterson, I want to chew my pulse. So much twisting of the truth. So you got to look at the context from where information is coming from and take things with a grain of salt, especially if, people have agendas. When a group has an agenda. So, yeah. Then another point to note is that we've already touched on Cwe Cwe being represented by AfriForum, and we've already, please people, go and look at some of AfriForum's activities online. Just take a look, pay attention. You'll follow the breadcrumbs, you'll see for yourself. Okay. People's masks are coming off, and I heard about AfriForum really for the first time. I wasn't interested in any of that. People must do what they want to do. But they came into my peripheral really for the first time with this Trump thing. And then I then started to pay attention, because if I want to talk about something, I want to know what I'm talking about. And I don't claim to know everything about them. All right. But just recently, there's been a lot of evidence that you've really got to look into what it is they're saying and doing very, very carefully. Don't just take it at face value. So the next point to note that I want us to discuss is the alleged letter asked for. Okay, no, this is it. So the buccal swab. All right. So I want to talk about the DNA here, because there's a lot of misunderstanding around the DNA group. The uproar from the community was because they asked for swabs from the caretaker, the driver, and the principal. Why the police did that, we don't know. This is their investigation. Perhaps they had their reasons. All right. But they asked for DNA. The caretaker gave DNA. The driver gave DNA, no issues, but the principal refused. There was a buccal swab that was taken from Cwe Cwe, and it was confirmed by the police chief that there was no foreign DNA found. Now, the assumption is that because there was no foreign DNA found on Cwe Cwe, some people ran with this and said, that must be the father or family member, because the DNA they found, because they did find DNA, and the DNA they found must be familiar DNA. That is a misconception, guys. There was no confirmation that DNA was found on her. There was no foreign substance, meaning that the sample that they found was her own. There is no confirmation that there is somebody else's DNA on her, right? Some people have said things to the effect that when I took the swab, I saw, you can see something that looks like, and make that assumption. When they tested the DNA, they confirmed that there was no foreign DNA found. This does not rule anybody out, though, guys, because people who do this kind of thing, or who practice this kind of thing, naturally is not going to want to leave evidence. So I just wanted to clear this up. The DNA, when they say there is no foreign DNA found, someone else's DNA was not found on her. That's what that means. But that does not mean.
I want to interject there. The perpetrator could have worn a condom.
Exactly.
So there are reasons why there was no DNA found on her. Doesn't mean that this did not happen because no DNA was found. There could have been so many different circumstances, like the perpetrator could have worn a condom.
So let's take the there are no suspects. We want to confirm that. There are people of interest. Let's take all people of interest out of the conversation just for a moment, Ruth. Let's talk about the potential mind of a pedophile. They have different kinks. They have different modus operandi. Times their thing can be, and this part of the conversation is going to become a little bit more graphic. So this is a trigger warning. If you are traumatized, if you've experienced trauma, if you have PTSD, perhaps you want to skip over this. Perhaps you want to check in with yourself. Am I in the state of mind to be a part of this next bit of the conversation? Maybe I should come back to it. Just check in with yourself. And throughout the conversation, just check in with your nervous system. Feel how you feel in your body. Speak to your therapist. Make sure that you are in a place where you can be a part of this part of the conversation without it causing you any harm emotionally or psychologically. Because it is going to become a little bit more graphic. We're going to be a little bit more candid without being vulgar. Okay. I'm going to try not to get our video banned before we even start. But sexual assault is not only genitals penetration. Okay. Sexual assault is not only penetration by the genitals of the perpetrator. It can be foreign objects. It can be other parts of the body. There are different things that the pedophile or the perpetrator can have an affinity towards. As you've mentioned, they could have used protection. They could have used something else. Some perpetrators, some pedophiles use foreign objects. They use gloves. And then they will masturbate and ejaculate somewhere else. Usually, pedophiles do not have one victim and then they never do it again. It's usually an ongoing behavior. And the more they get away with it, they think about this all the time. The more they perfect their techniques, they think about how to get away with it more and more. It is compulsion. It is not I'm deciding I'm going to hurt someone today. This is a compulsion. It's something they think about obsessively. It is it's a desire, and it consumes a lot of their mental capacity.
Edith, I just want to jump in there and interject and speak a little bit about the psychology or the cycle of abuse. So when you talk about pedophilia, okay, these are individuals who, and it can be male or female, it's not gender specific.
Yeah.
These are individuals who experience childhood abuse, okay? and this could have been major sexual abuse. And subconsciously, there's an attempt to recreate that trauma that they endured. So they could be an adult um, who then becomes an abuser themselves, right? Or they could even seek, if they don't have specific, even in a relationship that they have, there's this sort of power dynamic that goes on within pedophilia that presents itself. And this is when the abuse occurs and the cycle continues. So this is not necessarily a desire to harm others, but it's a twisted way. I think it's really important to know that it's a very twisted way of coping with unresolved trauma. So, and in extreme cases, this can, like you said, manifest as pedophilic tendencies where, they use objects, and where the perpetrator seeks out younger victims in an attempt to relive that victimization. So I just wanted to touch on that part, just to let our viewers know where this stems from.
You are going to look at a case like this through your lens, through your perspective. Someone who does this kind of thing doesn't necessarily think the way that you do. And when somebody, for example, when you are interested in someone and you feel really, really drawn to them, a lot of your time, energy, and attention goes into how you're going to woo this person. You put money into it. So there's a lot of effort, attention, time, and thought that goes into committing a crime like this. There's also a lot of shame associated with it. If I get caught, so the first priority is going to be, in order for me to do this thing, I need to put in measures that I do not get caught. That is something that they are avoiding at all costs. They do not think the way you do. And so just imagine for a moment the amount of effort that goes into the precautions to get away with this. So many do. There is so much that happens from the moment that the child begins to display abnormalities in their behavior or pain, or that something is not quite right, from that moment to going to the hospital, to the doctor, to the police. There's so many steps, and at any given time, the ball can be dropped where evidence is not collected properly or something happens. And if, for example, this did take place on the Monday, or there's so many things that could have happened between that time. A bath, washing, this, that, and the other. There's so many things that could happen. That people who do not spend all of their day, who hasn't studied and are not investigators, you don't think of these things, you're just trying to puzzle together a story. I'm telling you, we have to consider the reality that this perpetrator, whoever he or she is, has put in a lot of time and effort to make sure that they do not leave traces behind. That's a very real possibility. So there's many reasons for why foreign DNA may not have been found on Cwe Cwe. And we have to keep that in mind. That does not mean that because my foreign DNA was not found on the child that I'm not guilty. That does not mean that I'm not, that there's a number of reasons, and therefore the investigation is so important. And we have to start to get to a place where we're not tearing one another apart in the street, so we can start to look to the people who are supposed to be doing this job to a higher standard and holding them accountable. But if we're obstructing, they can just turn around and use our behavior, the fact that there's blood in the streets and they had to tear us off one another, as an excuse for them not doing their job. I think that's a reality we've got to face. We're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem. The other point that I want to note is that we spoke about the prosecutor declining prosecution, and this is due to lack of evidence, okay? Meaning not enough evidence was collected for this to go to court yet. That doesn't mean it cannot still happen. There is a statute of limitation. And the thing with criminals is that they always slip up somewhere. The more they get away with something, the more cocky they become. Obviously, you want this to be, you want to come to justice as soon as possible, but unfortunately, it's not what we live in. When there are loopholes, there are gaps, when things fall through the cracks, it just makes it easier for things to leak. But pedophiles who act upon their urges, and not all do. I just want to make that very, very clear. We want to give space to centering the people who commit these kinds of crimes, because we find that in most victims' experience, somebody protected them. Because there's such a denial, and avoidance and ignorance to the fact that someone that we love can be this kind of monster that we created in our head. These are human beings. These are our neighbors. These are our uncles. These are our friends.
And I think
we've
if I could interject there, it's so important that as a community, when you see something, speak up. Have the courage to say something. You know, this kind of story, which is one of many, right? It demands transparency. It demands courage. And those that have sat in the shadows, like you said, so many people know about something. If you do know about something, speak up about it. Have the courage to speak up about it. In our upcoming, we've got some lessons that we're going to be providing around courage, because we know that there are consequences to sometimes speaking out. It takes a lot of courage to speak about these issues.
Yes. Now, this brings me to a very important point. I want to talk about the video. I shared it with you, Sibuhlele. I'm going to butcher this name. Pakamis. She did a video in support of and wanting to share awareness on TikTok around this case. And she spoke about what she was witnessing on Twitter. And a lot of people mentioned this. Some people went onto Twitter and shared their stories. So not personal stories, but stories, perhaps secondhand stories. I just want to note that about kids at the very same school where there have been incidents with kids where they had been very upset and had told the adults around them that the principal had been touching them. I want us to go there, but I'm just realizing I don't want to jump ahead too far. I just wanted to touch on that with regards to what we were talking about, whole DNA thing. Sometimes other people, other victims come out, and then they can start to piece together a puzzle, right? So an investigation, my foster mom always said to me, the arm of the law is slow, but it's very long. And it will catch you at some point. So I just want to touch on, before we go there, findings in November. Okay. Number one, so this is based on why the prosecutor has declined prosecuting at this time due to lack of evidence. There is a lack of witnesses. We need to consider that. Even though the caretakers told her to sweep the classroom, um, there's not been much cooperation on behalf of the school. Like, who knows what went on? If their teacher saw something, what's going on? We don't have any information about that anybody's come forward to say, well, I was there and I noticed and this happened. We do know the caretaker was cooperative with giving DNA and probably gave a statement, but we've not been given that yet. Okay. So some of the possible reasons why a case will be thrown out by the prosecutor. The number one is due to lack of witnesses. I personally, and I mentioned earlier on, there is a statute of limitations, and to my knowledge, it might have changed to date, is that it's 30 years. So as an adult, when I told my family about my own experience with sexual assault, they did nothing. Later in life, I decided that I want to consider taking it to court, right? Because it's your story and it might be true, but unfortunately, if the person is not prosecuted, guys, he doesn't go onto the offenders list, which means he can still continue doing it, and it's your word against his or hers. Okay. But even though there were people around who knew some details about the story, they did not do this around other people. So I don't know what witnesses the prosecutor wants, but nonetheless, someone was interviewed who was around at the time, who lived in the same house, and it's a family member of mine, and she did not want to make a statement. She didn't want to be involved. She was protecting him. And because of that reason, the prosecutor said there's not enough evidence. I felt really let down, but at the same time, I understood that I would be dragged through the hearing. For a little girl, me as an adult, I can imagine that would be daunting, where they're questioning everything you're saying. How do you know this? No one else. He says you're just making trouble, and there's been all this conflict. And could it be that you're just being spiteful? You know, women are always being blamed for being spiteful because there are women that make up stories. But just imagine as a little girl in front, being interrogated by a lawyer. What color were you wearing on the day? Anybody that is experienced sexual assault, you try and erase all the details because in your brain you want to make it as if it didn't happen. So whether I was wearing pink or green or whatever, I disassociate from my body. So even the way that these things go to court needs to be adjusted because it makes it really difficult to prosecute a perpetrator. That person needs to be caught red-handed, basically lying on top of the child. Or he or she needs to be caught in action or video recorded for it to be enough evidence. So how do we get to a point where when these people are skilled and doing this on a regular basis and covering their tracks, the reality is your word is not good enough. And we can see that even with the public. The chief of police said it's a very complex case. It's not straightforward. Someone didn't walk in, catching action. It's complex. There's a lot of questions that are unanswered. And as a result, lack of evidence. So it needs to be investigated further. And this is why it's been handed over. All right. And the fact that it's been handed over shows that there was incompetence on the police. Now, the incompetence of the police that we talk about over and over and over every time that we hear of someone's experience. When is the standards? What is the training? How are we as a community? How are we how are we going to actually bring these people to a higher standard? Because they actually make it easy I will say this. It's easier in South Africa to get away with crime than it is to get a decent paying job. And anybody in the comments that can prove that what I'm saying is not true must do it, please. But I'm telling you, most of our viewers, most of our listeners are going to confirm that. That is the reality that we're dealing with. That is the reality that we're dealing with.
And I think that there was the petition that was signed. I read somewhere that there was over 1 million signatures collected because people want to see justice, not only for this case, but all the cases that have, there are so many individuals because of this case that have come forward, that have told their stories, that have had the courage to speak up because of what happened for Cwe Cwe. So not just in the form of headlines or statements, but real stories coming forward. I think that is a real good takeaway that we can take from this. But justice also, when you speak about justice now, Elephant, going through these points, it means believing children especially. I'm going to point out, because this is a case about a child, believing the victim. It means acting swiftly on that information. We can see a systematic, I almost want to say failure in this case on so many parts. It's not only with the judicial system, but it started at the school. So that no family, has to walk this path again. But just a shout out to the community, because there are so many people supporting this family, through comments. Sorry.
I said absolutely, yeah. We do want to acknowledge that, and it makes me very proud. Because I think it shows that there is change coming, that we are ready for change, and we do want to be part of the solution.
And by having this conversation, it's a really, really good start. By having conversations like these and getting that information out there, there is definitely these help available. Like I said, in our upcoming sessions, we are going to be looking into healing sessions, where we're going to be looking at the solution. And definitely courage is one of those things, stepping forward and having a voice and telling your story. If anybody would like to share their stories, you can send us an email on the email listed down below.
Yeah, definitely. And as Ruth said, we are actively working on a recovery course that we want to offer to the public as a support group, an online support group for healing and growth for those who have experienced sexual trauma, or family members and friends who want to know how they can better support their loved ones. We want to build a community of that fosters a culture of recovery. We want to build a community that is part of the solution and not the problem. So definitely contact us in the email if that is something that you feel you will benefit from. So let's continue. There's so much. There's lots to get through with this. As I mentioned earlier on, that the National Commissioner deployed the head of family violence and child protection to conduct their own investigation. Okay. And so that is still going on. We don't need to be disheartened that this is just going on and now, life just goes on. There is still an investigation underway. I want to talk about a journalist that asked a question, asked the police a question in an interview. The journalist's name is, I think, Ngezi. I'm not sure about the name, so please know that do your own research with this. But I just wanted to mention that this journalist did ask about 3 similar cases at the very same creche. They were in grade R or something. So this is not the only case. This is why the school was shut down. You know, things don't just happen. This principal was not just victimized and attacked. There is a reason. There are a few events and things that happened that led to the school being focused on. So this journalist did ask about these 3 similar cases from the same school in the area and wondering if they're also going to be investigated the way that Cwe Cwe's case is investigated. I would like to believe that this forms part of their overall investigation, but this should make the hair on anybody's back stand up. There are other stories coming out about this, and that's exactly what we were talking about. So there's definitely, where there's smoke, there's fire. Something is going on, something is happening, even if it's not related to Cwe Cwe. Even if what happened with Cwe Cwe is completely independent of the school. Something was going on at the school. So let's talk about some of the videos that we came across reporting on this case. I want to talk about Mother of the Sun first. You remember you sent me the video from Mother of the Sun?
Yeah.
Yeah. She said, she started the video with, and you can go and find her on TikTok, she's Mother of the Sun. She started a video with update about Cwe Cwe. And then her whole video was her opinion and speculation. Do you think that kind of exposure helps the case or harms the case? When you start a video with, this is an update about Cwe Cwe. It's an ongoing investigation, and she makes assumptions based on DNA findings, saying that there was no foreign DNA found. I'm telling you, this is the father.
I think that really speaks to how social media can sway, you know, the perceptions of whoever's watching this, right? It's really interesting. When people come with their own, they've not done their research first and foremost, but they come with their opinions. And the threads that I read on that particular post were quite interesting because people were automatically buying into this, like, this is the truth, this is the latest update, when half of those were not factual. Those were just, I think those were some of her own opinions. That's just my opinion. And she was just having a go at it. And other people were like, oh my word, let's talk about the father. And a conversation was sparked. And I thought, oh my word, half of this is not factual. So on the one hand, it sparked a conversation, but it was really harmful because that was not factual at all.
She decided that because the police chief said there was no foreign, because the statement was that there is no foreign DNA found on the child, that means that the DNA must be her own. So who has her own DNA? Her father. Now this makes me wonder, we want the police to tell us everything. But then we are taking what they're telling us and not going to learn what does it mean when there's no foreign DNA. We're just making our own assumption and calling it fact. And that's what she was doing. And people were really lapping it up.
I think we need to take everything that we read on social media with a grain of salt. Go and do your research, guys. Go and look at the news. Go look at, there is the Department of Education. They've got a timeline up on their site, which is actually ongoing. They are still busy looking into things. But I wanted to go into another comment. There was a journalist. He's actually going to be receiving an award. And he's taken down this post also because of what we just spoke about.
Okay, so first of all, we're talking about Emilio. What's his name? I wrote it down. Joe Emilio. to look at who Joe is, because Joe is a journalist. He says he's a journalist. I did not confirm that. I did not verify that, but he is up for a nomination for an award. So I suppose he could be right. Joe speaks, I watched some of his videos, and he definitely gets his information from AfriForum. He even said that when he did this um, broadcast about the Cwe Cwe case, that he got his information from AfriForum. So there we have it. Okay. A lot of what he said was not true. So basically, I just want to go through what he's got 1,374 comments to this video. And I also noticed that I think it was taken down, probably because of misinformation. But he reported, based on AfriForum's independent investigation, that the principal was not in contact with the child on the 14th. He was 2 kilometers away. We've already touched on that. That's not verified, but he reported it as if it's verified, okay? Then he said that he claims that the question about the principal's refusal to cooperate, that people were just attacking him without waiting for the facts about where he was and what he was doing, okay? People were not attacking him because of any facts. He put a big red flag on his head. He refused to give his DNA, and he was being very uncooperative with the mom, and he clearly intimidated the mom in that meeting.
Yeah.
And then he refused to cooperate by giving his DNA, so he implicated himself. He made himself look suspicious. And all people wanted was for him to give his DNA so that he can be ruled out, or whatever needs to happen so that the investigation can move forward. He also said that the victim, the child, failed to identify the principal. Now, had he actually done his research, he would know that she said she had fallen asleep on the floor in the classroom, so she doesn't remember what's happened. The child did not implicate anyone. Joe Emilio implied that the mother was trying to frame the principal. For what? For money. For what? That statement in itself is such an insult. So your comment is based on that, obviously. That's what the person was saying. Like, people were just quick to accuse him because they wanted to, we'll just repeat that comment again.
Let me just go back to the comment. This is obviously referring to the principal. We never said he was guilty. He's the principal of the school that concealed a crime, saying him acting not bothered and then expelling the child from the school says a lot. So, yeah.
Exactly.
But going back to what you said there, another person said on that specific post, said, the girl is 7 years old. Why can't she identify who assaulted her? This is very suspicious. Investigate the family, the friends, and the relatives of the child. So that's on the same post, a comment from someone. And again, going back to what you said a few moments ago, Elif, the child was possibly or allegedly asleep at the time, so she could have. And when trauma like this happens, sometimes our brains, in order to protect our bodies, will shut that memory out. There's so many things that could have happened. We don't know what happened. It was alleged that she was asleep or she fell asleep.
Okay. So on that point, there is a basis to assume that a child would be afraid to identify her attacker. There is a lot of evidence of that, first and foremost, because most of the time it is someone that she's trusted, that's in her circle. Usually it is someone in a position of power or authority, and there is fear. She feels she doesn't want to get into trouble. She's afraid. Most of the time, the victim, male or female, the little girl or little boy, was groomed and they don't want to get their predator into trouble. The onus is not on her to tell the story. This is why an investigation needs to be done, because child victims of sexual assault will seldom come out and say it. That is why there is a forensic psychologist, because in forensic psychology, there is a particular procedure that is followed through play therapy where they see what's happened. Most of the time, the child doesn't even have the words to say what happened. She is a child. She doesn't know how to describe it. She doesn't know how to explain it. She just knows she's afraid.
Absolutely.
So, shows the ignorance for adults to be like, why does the child not say? As if the 7-year-old's main focus is going to be to protect, to frame someone, to protect someone else. This is not the movies, guys. Like, really. And if you don't know, the reason why I can say this is because I've got a lot of personal experience, right? And I'm not saying that what I know is everybody's story. There's always various variables. Anything is possible. What we know is that we know nothing. That is what we must know.
Absolutely. I just want to say to our viewers as well, when I do coach people, some adults find it hard, and these are people in their 40s or 50s, find it hard to articulate or find the words to describe what happened to them when I ask them what happened during the assault, and this could have happened years ago. So for a 7-year-old to articulate those details, it must be extremely, extremely hard to do that.
Yeah. So I see in the comments, when I go through the comments, it's very telling of where we are as a community. On this specific case, I must say, quite honestly, there are a lot of people who are really sensible around this and are very supportive of and fully aware of the challenges that we're facing when it comes to this kind of thing. That's very encouraging to see. And then you have those people that clearly don't leave their neighborhoods or maybe their houses, and they just their entire sense of truth is based on what they've read online. When it comes to Emilio, that is a pointing case. When I listen to him, before I even look into a little bit more about who he is and the content he creates, I just felt he sounds like a privileged white man, and you can come for me in the comments. But what that means is, like, he lives in a particular society where he only gets to see, like, through one window, in a very small window. And he's not South African. He's from Texas, married to a South African woman. I don't know his wife, but I can put my money on that she's probably white. He doesn't have insight into the lives of South Africans as a whole. And he takes his news from AfriForum for whatever reason. And clearly he runs with information and facts that is not verified. And therefore, that's why this video was probably taken down. So just because he's a journalist, I always say, read people's energy. If someone's pushing something, and I hope that it is recognized that in this podcast, we're not pushing anything. We want to be a united front. We want to be a part of the solution. And in order to be a part of the solution, we must be able to call ourselves out. We must be able to call ourselves out. And in our upcoming podcast episodes, we're going to go into greater detail around the role that family members play. It is also very prominent that many women will protect their husbands. So there are people that feel and believe that's the narrative. I don't find any traces of that in the story, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible. we've all had experience of women in our families that are or communities that are supposed to be protecting us, favoring and protecting our attack. And we're going to go into more detail about those things, and we're certainly going to touch on all of these dynamics, these social dynamics and constructs that affect how a victim is supported, how a predator gets away with this kind of behavior in our upcoming podcast episodes. But we're certainly going to work through this and process through this in our course on recovery, which we want to make available to the public as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I feel like we've brought this story to date, we've brought it together in a way where it paints a clear picture of what's happened, and hopefully it's cleared up some of the misinformation and the misconception. Is there anything else, Ruth, that you'd like to discuss? I think that we've covered everything, and hopefully we are really, I'm holding space for the family. I feel that Cwe Cwe's mom is incredibly brave. The way she told the story, I have reason to believe that her husband is supportive. And I'm going to trust that Cwe Cwe has a loving, supportive family, because that is based on the stories. That is what I believe. And that we're going to get justice, that we're all going to get justice for her and every other victim, little girl and little boy. And then indirectly for all of us, the adults who have any children who were not heard, who were not seen. And hopefully we can begin to see the change. The petition that was signed for Cwe Cwe, I personally signed it. I think that is such a testament to who we are and the direction that we're moving in as a humanity. So if there is anything that our viewers can add to this that will be of any help, please do reach out to us. Send it to us in the emails. If you'd like to be on our list, but our email list to receive information around the support group, the online support group, where we will be offering coaching and therapy sessions and process work for our healing, our collective healing, contact us, send us your details via email as well. All right.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to our viewers for the time today. We know it was a bit of a lengthy one, but it was such a good one. This case speaks to the resilience of the community, of her parents. What a stellar mom. I just want to give a shout out to her mother, who has been so resilient in seeking justice for her daughter. So just as we close today's conversation, again, reiterating what Elif said, we hold space for all the stories, the questions, the pain that comes from this, or the trauma for the collective. And this is a call to justice, what we discussed. So just a bit about Healed. We just don't want to raise awareness. We want to be part of the solution. That means offering resources, like Elif said, which we'll give you more information on. But do send us an email, guys. If you want to share your story, feel free to do so. Like Elif said, we're launching a guided recovery course soon. So look out for that. We're going to be sending details. And just to remind you again that this is a safe and a sacred space, and we want to invite you to help us protect it by showing up with courage and honesty and care. And do share your stories with us. Leave them in the comments below. And it was an absolute pleasure to have you today. And see you next time.
Yes. Take care. Look after yourself. And you matter. We will be in touch. And we hope that you will join us in our next podcast interview when we get together to chat again. We want to make this a space where we're just getting together like friends and we're just talking about things that matter. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe, do all the things, and yeah, we look forward to connecting with you more. Take care.
Take
Bye.
care, guys. Bye.